Hi folks, thanks for stopping by. I thought it was about time to let you know a very unfortunate truth about me, and that is that I enjoy cringe. I enjoy terrible, awful, makes you want to cry sort of cringy things. And I thought, what better way to share that with you than to read some excerpts from one of my favorite subreddits, RPGHorrorStories. This is a curated collection of top this month or so entries, and I have read them beforehand, so there will not be any truly, I think, offensive things that would require some sort of trigger warning. However, I will keep any swearing intact. I think this will be fun, and if I am wrong, I apologize, but I hope at least you will be bored to sleep. So, let's start with my first entry, titled, DM Decides to Completely Rewrite My Character. Encountered a DM recently who was more of the author type, the kind that is clearly just seeking an audience for their writings rather than a truly interactive experience. But despite that, he had no written-up lore documents on his homebrew world. It was just kind of stream of consciousness and whatever he felt like putting down if I asked a question while trying to figure out some means of anchoring my character with a backstory. There were a few things that caught my fancy, and with some work with him, I built up a character and general idea. What really caught my eye in his lore drops was mention of floating settlements. I really wanted to explore that somewhat further, so I decided to make a character geared towards being mobile with watercraft, so I could enjoy an adventure of questing up and down the river. What I started with for my character: a member of a small, close-knit community in a well-traveled portion of the river, mostly consisted of related people, and with each person having a distinct role in said small community. Good family relations, and particularly close with their siblings. My character had a well-defined role that took her outside the village on needed supply and trading runs to help keep their home supported, and also to help supply a reason to be out and about and take on quests, discover things, meet new people, etc. It was, as I mentioned, all to help with jumping off into exploration of the floating settlements and adventures evading river pirates. What I got instead was a complete rewrite of that within a dozen posts once we started. Not a single person in the settlement liked my character, trusted, or respected her. Despite being in her mid-20s, she was treated like an irresponsible child and talked down to by everyone. Her dad was a drunk who ignored her while indulging a gambling addiction. Her mom wasted no opportunity to scold her for wasting her life on irresponsible pursuits, which was apparently anything and everything she did. And the friends I mentioned in her backstory and briefly encountered in character were mean and shitty to her. For these reasons, she was given an absolutely shitty task under the flimsiest of reasons. When I questioned this, I was told, "Your character has a bad reputation, and you're going to have to work to restore that." Excuse me, why does my character have a bad reputation in her own hometown? Apparently, because it makes it interesting. Okay, sure. And then the final straw came. The DM wrote that my character did not attend the big local event earlier that day because she was too timid and cowed by her family's disapproval to do it. Excuse me, what? How on earth is that for the DM to decide? When I protested, the DM said that it makes for a better story this way, and continued to have her brother cruelly needle at her. Anyway, no D&D is better than bad D&D that results from the DM deciding that my character needed a complete rewrite with no input from me, and also that petty family drama was somehow more interesting than actual adventures. That is so awful. Why would you do that? If somebody already had an established story and a family relationship and all of that, why would you then decide that, nah, instead they're just gonna be miserable and everybody hates them? I really think that's super lazy of the DM to just completely modify somebody else's backstory. I don't know. I don't like that. I think that's the DM is completely in the wrong here. The top comment is, makes a better story. For whom? To which OP responded, the DM's fanfic, I guess. And that's pretty accurate. It just sounds like they want to indulge in this making of a character that's so bullied and so awful and disrespected and all this so they can make drama out of it. I think that's pretty lame. I think the DM should do better. Next up, am I the asshole for kicking my friends out of my game? I've been running a Pathfinder 2e for a year. A few players have come and gone, conflicting schedules, mental health, one just ghosted. But from the beginning, it's been me, the GM, my fiancée Kate, my friend Albert, and my other friend Sophie. Eventually we added Zach, whom we met on Discord, and who has been an absolutely great player. Quick context. Albert likes D&D 5e, which he has DM'd occasionally, but all of his games fall apart because, frankly, he can't deal with any scheduling issue and just calls the thing off as soon as any inconvenience arises. It's no secret he prefers D&D 5e to Pathfinder 2e, which I respect. I am the opposite, and still would play at his 5e games when he ran them. He refuses to run games online, so there's that. So last year I decided to start my game and invited Albert and Sophie. I live way too far from downtown to expect either people to come to my house or go to Albert and Sophie's apartments, not to mention my fiancé is living in a different city at the moment, so the only realistic option was to play online. I know it's not the same, but I've spent a lot of time learning how to run games on Foundry VTT and a bit of money on hosting and premium modules. Albert has complained about online gaming not being the same, but frankly I can't do anything about that, and there are some upsides. One thing that stood out to me from the start is how plain and basic Albert and Sophie's characters were. Not mechanically, because who cares, but all Albert gave me for his backstory was, my character is a married city guard, and Sophie's was, I run a potion shop. No NPCs from their past, aside from Albert's wife. No goals, no conflict, nothing. I know this is how some people make their PCs, but I've seen their characters for other games, and they put way more thought into them. Anyway, we play the game, and once Zach joins, we hit our stride. I start adding bits and pieces to the game from their backstories, adding mystery, linking their personal stuff to the overarching narrative, all of that. But Albert and Sophie were just there. They didn't engage with NPCs or other players. They didn't make decisions. I made up a long-lost brother of Albert's, and he just went, okay. To be brutally honest, the sessions when both Albert and Sophie were missing, which were quite a few, way more than Kate, who works as a nurse with chaotic shifts, and Zach hasn't missed a single one, were the best. No awkward silences where Kate and Zach tried to give Albert or Sophie the spotlight. No Albert getting pissy because I wouldn't just let him do something that his character wouldn't be able to do. No decision-making where 50% of the party just sat in silence. Sophie's birthday was on the first Saturday of June, and Zach wouldn't be able to make it either, so I set the first session of June for the 13th, yesterday, when Zach told me, on the 19th of May, 26 days in advance. The date was pinned on both our Discord server and WhatsApp group chat. So yesterday arrives, and when I ask everyone if they're ready for the game, less than 4 hours before the session was supposed to start, both Albert and Sophie told me they forgot that they had a session and that they made plans. The sessions have always been on Saturdays at 4 p.m., so it wasn't a matter of tracking a changing schedule. That was the last straw. I can forgive someone for forgetting a session once, but the fact that they didn't tell me in advance, the fact that the session of the previous week was cancelled specifically because of Sophie, and she still didn't remember, their disinterest in the game, and the fact that they didn't even apologize was too much. I told them I was burned out and kicked them out of the group chat and Discord server. They have not reached out. TLDR, players who showed little to no interest in the game forgot our weekly session. I kicked them out. Am I the asshole? I feel like this OP gave Albert and Sophie more chances than I probably would have, especially if they showed such blatant disinterest in participating in any meaningful way. I can't imagine trying to lead a game where half of my party is just constantly like, oh, I don't know, I don't care. That is so frustrating. And they don't really seem to care, so I don't really think it matters that OP kicked them out, honestly. No D&D is better than bad D&D, I guess. Maybe OP should have given them more of the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know. I think they were more patient than I ever would have been, so I am notoriously impatient with stuff like that. So I think I don't think they're in the wrong for doing this. Not the asshole. Not at all. Top comment is, not the asshole at all. I'm always for people drawing boundaries, and I'm friends, so I mess up your life with low effort isn't the line of reasoning I'm sympathetic to. What you did is something I've told people often to do, but they're too timid to do it. That said, dealing with any social fallout is to be expected. To be honest, sounds like your friends don't care, so dodged a bullet there. That pretty much summed up exactly how I feel about it. Next up, DM let another player repetitively steal my character idea. I've been playing a campaign for about 2 years now. Homebrew, about sailing adventures, not D&D. Big part of this campaign are downtime mechanics about living on a ship. Travel by sea takes time. DM lets us use this time to learn new skills or perform actions fitting to characters. There is one mythical race, Sirens, who is presented as the greatest enemy of sailors. Everyone in the party has some sort of secret backstory, and players like drama between characters. The party consists of a zealous crusader on a crusade against sirens, a sharpshooter priest, a scientist, a problem player who switches characters every few months, let's call him Alan, and me, a secret siren. Before the campaign began, I spoke at length with the DM on how to approach this, and if it is okay to play a siren, and he approved. My character is a siren who hates sirens, wants to be human more than anything, and is looking for magic which could help her with that. She only turns into her true form if water touches her skin, and in the downtime, she was studying elemental water magic to make sure it doesn't touch her so she doesn't transform. The DM made me an Excel spreadsheet of prerequisites and time required to learn simple skills. That is very intricate. The DM was also very slowly leading her towards people who could help her become human. The players don't know she's a siren, and I've been working on a big reveal, a one-shot I was going to run, where she changes into a human, and the party can decide what happens to her next, if they want to abandon/fight/forgive her. About 6 months ago, I learned from the scientist player about his secret backstory. He is in love with the siren, and in downtime developed a ritual to turn sirens into human. Now he adventures in hopes of finding her again to be together. When we discovered how well our backstories complemented each other, we decided to cooperate to finish our stories. Since then, we were role-playing our characters as becoming friends and slowly letting each other know our secrets, and thus the other players, to the point that on the next session we were going to perform the ritual. And then the DM tells us he will make another spreadsheet of magic for performing the ritual and asks us to wait another few months. At this point, we just wanted to finish the story we were building with him and each other for so long, but we agreed to wait. Next session comes, and Alan brings a new character. Until now, my character was the only support in the party. But now Alan is declaring that he will play a supportive character who had mostly the same skills as mine. In this system, the overlap is very significant. There are not many supportive skills to choose from, so now most of our kit is the same. The fight suddenly got so much easier. I found myself getting bored, and outside of fights, most of my character's niche had gotten taken over by the new character. Alan was very eager to test new skills, and jumping at occasions to use them. I was feeling that my character was not useful. I spoke to the DM if there was any way to finish my story so that I can either change my character or rework her. The DM suggested I make a rework without finishing the story. I was okay with that, So now my character was more of an illusion artist who, instead of supporting allies, misleads enemies. I sent it over to just the DM, and he gave me a thumbs up. Next session, before I even had a chance to talk about my rework, Alan declared he had reworked his character as it felt a bit bland, and revealed he is now an illusion artist who is going to debuff and mislead enemies. I was shocked by this and, after the session, brought up my concerns to the DM, who told me, "I will not forbid any of my players from playing what they want to play." I said I never wanted to forbid anyone, but I want to play a different archetype, as I feel overshadowed by Alan. Other players agreed with me, as it seemed weird to them that Alan somehow made very similar characters to mine for a second time in a row without me telling him what I was going to play. The DM solution was to tell me to make another rework. I agreed. So I decided to lean more into a siren theme and foreshadow it a bit. My character was casting illusions on herself and hypnotizing enemies with them, then dealing damage. The DM approved. Imagine my surprise when I came to the next session and Alan declared another rework. And now he is playing a friendly siren, whose mission is to convince everyone on the ship that sirens are their friends. Why? Because she fell in love with a human, not the scientist. She wants to convince the Crusader to abandon his crusade as his god has forgiven her and all other sirens. The DM does not see a problem with this. Me, the scientist, and the Crusader all feel that this new character basically destroyed the stories of our characters that we were building for the past 2 years. And it turned out that right at the beginning of this campaign, Alan did something very similar to except Crusader never did a rework, so they just played overlapping characters for a few months. Now I'm going to quit this group, as the DM basically told me he started this group so that Alan could play RPGs, and his fun is the most important to him, which I would be fine with if it wasn't at other players' expense. I can't trust this DM to let me finish a story that I've been writing for 2 years. I can't imagine playing at his table anymore. That's terrible. And the top comment, I'm just going to read it because it pretty much sums me up. It seems clear to me, at least, that one of 3 things pretty much has to be true, and they all suck. Alan has not one single original idea in his head, and the DM is deliberately telling him about your character's potential reworks, which he subsequently copies. Alan is deliberately trying to suss out and then copying other people's characters because he likes upstaging people. That's his fun. And both of the above. Alan is a troll copycat, and the DM is enabling him deliberately. I don't know how to feel about that. The DM even says that Alan's happiness is the most important. And that's just really depressing because at least 3 people in this game have tried to create characters and feel upstaged or copied or ignored by the DM, and that their stories have been sort of destroyed, and that Alan clearly doesn't have an original idea, and he just wants to play what everybody else is playing, which seems grievously unfair. Terrible DM. I wouldn't sit at their table either. I feel bad for OP, though. That seems like a really fun idea to have developed, only for it to get stolen. And I mean, yes, it's just a game, but you can get really attached to your characters, and you can really get attached to plots and designs and development, and then to just have someone decide they're going to copy you and do the exact same thing as you is really, really frustrating. That doesn't seem fair. Next up is a story that I found pretty funny. Paladin tries to counterfeit coins, ends up burning a tavern down, and getting his friend executed. I was TMing a Humblewood campaign for the past few weeks, and across these sessions something hilarious unfolded. You see, I made all of the player characters start broke at level 1. In normal D&D, as long as you do quests, money is never an issue. You'll have hundreds of gold by the end of a campaign that at least my party never ends up using. So instead, especially since I think it fits the setting, I had them start broke and need to afford or gather 2 meals a day, plus lodging, if they didn't want to risk encounters, as Humblewood is set in a large, very dangerous forest. So it started when they approached Winnowing Reach. We had a party of 5, but none are relevant to the story except the paladin servant, Deerfolk, and the birdfolk stork artificer. I told them that they could work odd jobs in order to afford their meals and lodging, so they did. They split up and did different types of labor and got paid accordingly, just to buy time before they set out for the Mock Fields, dangerous slime swamp, for a quest in the morning. But the servant had an idea. The servant and the stork were stocking shelves in a store, and the servant was tired of being broke, so he had a very bright idea. He spotted some silver metallic paint on a shelf. Now I rolled to see whether the paint was in the front or the back, and it was in the front. He then continued to open the can of paint, dip 5 copper coins inside, and then close the paint can. And unfortunately for him, he only rode mediocre, so he had paint all over his fingertips after dropping copper coins into the paint in the front of the store. I thought it was funny. Then one of my players showed me something that made it borderline hysterical. If you're familiar with the standard D&D currency, you'll know that the copper, silver, and gold, alongside platinum and electrum, all have different shapes and colors. You see, copper coins are squares with rounded edges, making a square octagon-like shape, and silver coins are silver, but are triangles. He hadn't made silver coins, he had made silver-dipped squares. The table started laughing, but he didn't know why, and he'd already gone through with it. At the end of his shift, he was paid 3 copper. However, he didn't complain, because in his mind, he had already gotten his money's worth for this shift. Then, while handing him the coins, the shopkeep notices his silver-tipped fingers he fails to conceal. The shopkeep asks him why his fingers are dipped in silver, then looks at the open paint can on the front shelf. He puts the pieces together and starts to walk to call the guards for thievery, but then the servant has a great idea. Bribe him. He pulls out 3 of his 5 counterfeit coins and tries to bribe the shopkeep. Well, let's just say the table couldn't stop laughing for a solid 5 minutes when I pulled up the image of currency. And it didn't stop there. When the shopkeep ran out of the shop and locked the doors behind him, the servant's pyromaniac friend, the stork, came to his rescue as they shot fire at the guards, the store, and then escaped through the glass. Then they ran into the bar to find the other party members, the guards right behind them, and at a dead end. The stork pushed the entire bartender's wall of alcohol down on him, then set fire to it and the bartender below the shattered bottles. He watches as the man burns alive, the fire spreading wildly throughout the bar, and he kidnaps one of the party members who just witnessed this. They all run up the stairs, the other party members watching in horror, and then jump out of the second-story window into the night. The bar ends up collapsing and kills 14 civilians and guards in the flames, most of whom who were sleeping on the second floor when it collapsed. Now, one of the other players was very attached to said kidnapped player, so after he found the kidnappers, he absolutely beat them to get his friend back, resulting in the other 2 getting thrown into jail. I never said the players had to work together, especially since these 2 just decided to turn a 3-day jail sentence and a fine into execution. It made perfect sense they would turn on them. After talking to the rest of the player characters and successfully rage-baiting a guard going through a divorce after they leave, the servant and the stork are able to distract him enough to catch fire to the jail tent and brute force the lock, just barely escaping before the steel-framed tent collapsed onto them. They escaped into the forest. Later, on the trail to the big city Alderheart, I gave them one last chance to reunite with the party. The good side of the party, in character, felt rightly betrayed by the murderers their acquaintances have become, even bringing up that the first red flag was when the servant tried to chop off a bandit's head with a dull knife for hooking it onto his belt earlier down the road. The stork ended up rage-baiting the rest of the party, especially the barbarian, that led the party to fight. In the end, the party took them back to Winnowing Reach, where they were both sentenced to hanging for the devastation they brought onto the community. The stork suffocates and is hanged. However, the servant's knot was loose. Because servants are pretty big compared to the rest of the species in the wood, I give it a chance for the rope to be unused to his mass and weight, And, well, I suppose fate favored the wicked, and he managed to dodge, jump the fence, and escape back into the woods, never to be heard from again. After that entire 5-hour detour, the rest of the party with morals decides to get back on the road, feeling no remorse whatsoever about those criminals they had thought to be their companions, continuing the campaign. We all had a lot of fun watching this tomfoolery unravel, and fate truly seemed to be in their favor during some parts of it. I doubt my players will ever overlook something such as currency again. I just thought that was a funny one. I enjoyed that. The servant and the stork are definitely jerks, but it made for good roleplay. The top comment says, "So, is the paladin an oathbreaker now?" And the response is oath failure an option? I feel that oathbreaker gives them too much credit here. Sometimes you just need a good funny one. And last but not least, I have another Am I the Asshole? Am I the asshole for being mad at the DM for a mechanic brought out of nowhere that caused my character to die? So some context. The campaign is a homebrew campaign featuring homebrew rules for weapons, spells, and is a campaign centered around a grimdark, heavy punishment campaign setting using 5e. Names are omitted. My character will be called Dex the Elf, and there is another character named Gru the Gnome. The incident happened during a battlefield session, where the DM had to manage groups of fighters on both sides using swarm rules. Before the battle happened, we raided a base and had gotten homebrew barrels called Moonfire. Here we were told that these barrels are meant for burning flesh and were lethal to creatures. And when leaving, I, only one who saw this, found out that the barrels end up making a massive explosion when next to each other. During the battle, the DM, while managing multiple NPCs and swarms, was doing great, and, when we asked questions about the barrel, he explained that the barrels explode when dealt fire damage from an arrow, and that force damage or being thrown at a very high speed can cause it to explode. I specifically asked what the range of the explosion for a lone Moonfire barrel would be, and he said 30 feet. So we used several barrels to end up killing enemy battalions, reducing their numbers to just a few cavalry and a lot of archers. When the archers were about 70 feet away, Dex threw an explosive barrel centered around them, using rolling and strength to get it all the way in a favorable position to not affect allies. The cavalry was next in the initiative, and had sadly killed Gru, the mighty wizard who got dealt 22 damage and died. But before dying, he was given the ability to cast a 3rd level spell in a blaze of glory mechanic just introduced to us. He decided, in his last moments before meeting his late wife, to cast a fireball centered around the barrel. Now this was never explained to us, but apparently a fireball can result in the explosion increasing to 150 feet. Dex was behind some wooden barricades, fireball spreads around corners, 70 feet away. So he got 8d6 plus 4d8 damage with no way of saving from that. As he was dealt over 52 damage and had basically 20 HP, he instantly died. I had asked the DM right when it was happening, can Dex please roll an attack roll using his whip to swing himself out of that explosion, something to save himself. But the DM demanded a high DC, for which my character sadly did not make. My character did get revived by the grace of a war god, but he now is part plant, which makes him have vulnerability to fire. But at plus 30 max HP, which is like 150% max HP for Dex's ass. Now, while lighthearted, and I enjoy the homebrew mechanics that were introduced to the campaign, I feel very upset when my character had died due to a mechanic that wasn't explained to Gru's player. While the DM had previously allowed me to roll for a Dex save in the previous encounter with a Moonfire barrel, he did not let me roll for this one at first without me asking for one. I kept myself silent for the session with some light jokes, but I don't know if I took this too badly, and that the fault of this is on me for not informing Gru about the chain reactions with the Moonfire barrels, and trying to connect the dots that a fireball is the same as a Moonfire barrel explosion. I did enjoy the session, and I have to preface that DM had to manage so many, and too much people, so he may have forgotten about a thing or two. So now half of Dex's gear is destroyed, and he is now revived at his grave. Am I the asshole? I don't think there's really an hassle in this scenario. I think that Tex probably should have told Gru about the Moonfire barrels, and I think that, sure, the DM probably was a little bit inconsistent, but they were also dealing with a lot. So I don't know if this is particularly worth getting worked up over. It's hard to really say that I think anyone is truly a problem in this scenario, but I don't know. You guys give me what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion on this one. Top comment says, whatever you're playing is already house ruled to high heaven. Being upset at this rule when you weren't at making it a whip attack to avoid damage is just being goofy. Enjoy the Calvin Ball. Make sure to wear a bandit mask. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this one's sort of difficult. I just feel like maybe OP is a bit overreacting, but I could be wrong. Let me know how you feel. Alright, that is all I have for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed. If not, I hope you're asleep. Let me know how you liked this in the comments. I'd love to see if I should do another one. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.